All right, kids, school is back in session all over the country, meaning more pencils, more books, more teachers' dirty looks, which are actually cleaner than the looks that some teachers get. With schools no longer being out for summer, there will be school board meetings. And this is what we're going to talk about today because it's where a middle-aged man in middle management probably can expose himself to middle school age kids in order to protest a lax dress code. And not that it was his goal or an excuse for him to buy a crop top and Daisy Dukes from the thrift store and put them on at long last, but that clip didn't lead to him being famous or infamous for that matter. And just in case, I haven't used his name. After all, school board meetings are recorded, then posted on the internet. And one video can change your life. It's how Haley Welch could go from being interviewed in Nashville, Tennessee, to kicking it with Shaq, throwing out the first pitch at a Mets game, and getting invited on podcasts. All for getting on a microphone and saying,
you gotta give him that huck too and spit on that thing, you get me?
And if you don't know what that means, I don't know what celebrity means anymore. We'll see if Haley's fame lasts more than 15 minutes and if it brings her fortune, especially if she does a right-wing turn. Moms for Liberty is going to pay her to say, we want students to hawk to the Lord or something. The point is, we can track where modern day famous for being famous people originated. And as you're about to see, celebutantes aren't the only ones who made it big with little to no talent. Here's where using social media to get elected came from.
My name is Mark Robinson. I live at 4015 Sassafras Court. That's right here in Greensboro. I've lived in Greensboro all my life. What I really came down here for is this. I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group, and domestic violence and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And here's who the majority is. I'm the majority.
Before I continue, apophysis. If you don't know what that means, it's defined as the raising of an issue by claiming not to mention it. Like, we won't discuss his past crimes, or saying, I will not bring up my opponent's questionable financial dealings. With that said, when Mark Robinson refers to himself as the majority, I refuse to make a joke about his weight. Anyways, you would think that Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, was calling out some law or bill that was going to take away his guns, but nah. He was speaking in favor of gun rights in 2018 at a city council meeting in Greensboro, North Carolina, during a debate about whether or not the city would hold its annual gun and knife show. Only that year, the show was to take place a few weeks after the Parkland High School shooting in Stoneman Douglas. Speaking of, Robinson wrote in a public Facebook post on his personal page in 2018, let me see if I have this correct. A spoiled, angry, disobedient child shot and killed 17 of his classmates, and now spoiled, angry, know-it-all children are trying to tell law-abiding adults that we must give up our constitutional right to own certain weapons. No matter, this video went viral after it was shared by Republican Mark Walker on Facebook in April of 2018. Robinson didn't even know he was conservative back then. Always had been though, until he read a book by Rush Limbaugh. He was working in furniture manufacturing at that time, and this self-promotion allowed him to drop out of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. He then left his job to focus on public speaking engagements. The National Rifle Association of America invited him to speak at their annual convention later that year. A short time after that, he became North Carolina's lieutenant governor and may become governor this November. All because of this.
I didn't have time to write a fancy speech. I didn't have time to, I didn't have the resource of an English teacher to sit down and write a speech with at school today and be, brought over here or practice or anything.
With that template in mind, and based on my previous freelance work, a few updates added, let's focus on what I'm going to call the school board meeting to politician pipeline.
CRT, all of that, the parents don't want it. It's a big fat lie. There's not one, if you believe in CRT, I want to tell you you're a liar, because that means you look at your black neighbor and say that they're oppressed, and you look at your white neighbor and say that they're evil, regardless of the experience that you've had with them.
Brian Echevarria talking about CRT. Y'all remember CRT? Before DEI and woke, middle America had problems with critical race theory. I wonder why conservatives Stop talking about it, though. Did they solve that problem?
The fact is, I've been a business owner right here in North Carolina, and I deal with white people, black people, Hispanic people. My children deal with everybody. And the racism is only happening at the government level and on the media. The fact is, you have racists, and there's you can't even find them hardly. You just hear the stories about them.
The general public is free to speak at Caribous County School Board business meetings, and Brian was speaking on February 14th, 2022. Note the date. See, as of January 7th, 2022, Brian began running for North Carolina State Assembly, District 73, House of Representatives. Looking at the scheduled school board meeting calendar, there was an opportunity to speak just 3 days later on January 10th. He must have missed it. I skimmed through that meeting and didn't see a biracial, multiracial man like Brian, as he described himself, say anything. The next available day for him to speak was that Monday, February 14th day he chose. This was a free PR stunt. He knows the state of North Carolina voted for Trump. He knows that Caribous County did as well. He was projecting to a conservative base, hoping it will go viral. And it did. Brian was invited to be interviewed on Fox News by Harris Faulkner, also Laura Ingraham, who asked him what compelled him to deliver what she thought was an amazing, unbelievable speech. According to him, quote, "It's just that time. We have to win this moment." Later saying, when he thinks about the life he wants for his pecan-colored kids, his words, not mine, every time he turns around, someone's trying to take that from them. But that's not happening. It didn't happen, according to him. As he said, you can't even find the racists hardly. You just hear the stories about them. And 7 months beforehand, Caribous County Board of Education issued a resolution to ensure dignity and non-discrimination in schools, which included one race or sex is not inherently superior to another race or sex, that an individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex is not inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, that an individual should not be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race or sex, amongst other things. This all but outlawed what they believe CRT is and it being taught in their school district. So no matter what kind of planter's nuts describe his kid's complexion, he ain't got to be so salty. Now, there's no guarantees that a policy prohibits discrimination. However, it's not like Brian named names of teachers, administrators, staff, or people in their community who were telling his kids that they can't do or be what they want to do or be. So if you're wondering why he said to his kid's school district that parents didn't want CRT even though it wasn't being taught there or not going to be taught there, well, he is also the type of dude to tell a school board that racism is only happening at the government level and on the media, then try to become a politician and campaign on cable news. Brian was a financial advisor. Him and his wife opened a coffee shop. He may be the owner of a business called Spank That Tail LLC that is now dissolved, but posted memes on Facebook about spanking children who, among other things, were caught twerking and not going to church. It also linked to a website called spankthattail.com, which is inactive, but still. He went out of his way to bring up trans athletes in that viral video of his. He invited Mark Robinson to speak at one of his events, and Echevarria reportedly paid a consultant earlier this year named Woodrow Johnston, who has ties to the Proud Boys. When asked about that $57,000, Brian said, "The story you have been pitched is another example of the establishment trying to crush a conservative grassroots movement in North Carolina," before claiming, "I am being asked about the company that prints and sends my mailers." He lost that District 73 election in 2022 by a narrow margin, by the way. He's running again and has already won the Republican primary for North Carolina House of Representatives District 82. That per Ballotpedia, beating his opponent despite having less campaign finances. I wonder what put him over the top.
This past year, we spent $1 million on a diversity office. And how did that benefit Black children? How did it benefit children in general? Well, 78% of 3rd through 8th grade black students are not proficient in math in Wake County.
Pastor John Amenchukwu. I may have been able to mention him in my Black to the 50s video.
In the Jim Crow era, black students were locked out of the public school system. But today they are trapped in. And many of these students need options. They need school choice. They need the opportunity to take their taxpayer dollars and take it to school systems that will benefit them and support them and educate them.
Need options, need school choice, taking their taxpayer dollars. Johnny B. Good wouldn't be the executive director of a private school, would he? He is, or at least was.
And as we talk about inclusion and making sure that the trans student feels comfortable and the queer student feels comfortable, what does that have to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic? As we are teaching cultural Marxism and grooming children to be the next pervert, we are damaging our kids in this public school system, and it needs to stop.
It's the buzzwords. Cultural Marxism, grooming, linking queer and trans communities for merely existing to perverts instead of men of the cloth like him. Amenchukwu, whose name means I know God, and was sure to let the Wake County School Board know that up front before quoting scripture about millstones being placed around necks, spoke at a school board meeting on October 18th, 2022. And wouldn't you know it, that was just 2 weeks after his book Erased had been published. Wow, seems to be a formula here. And I can end the video right there, but what you may have missed in this rant of his was Amenchukwu pointing out how, according to 2020-2021 school year state test data, Wake's black students in grades 3 through 8 were not proficient in math and reading. Test scores dropped sharply in Wake County and nationally during the pandemic. But whatever. He didn't say that the numbers improved slightly in the 2021-2022 school year, but black students are still passing at much lower rates than white students in Wake County and, well, nationally. Again, that happened all over the country. And why is that? Is it because Wake County, according to Amenchukwu, spent $1 million on a diversity office and not placing that money elsewhere where it's more important? Let's assume it's true. After all, they did hire their first director of diversity and inclusion. However, Wake County school literacy proficiency had been at that level for at least 12 years prior to that. In fact, it slightly improved. Here's the data from 2009. So, as Maddox Rule says, if you want to argue against funding for those initiatives, there's an argument to be made. But this ain't it. Plus, this data from 2010 comes right around the same time that Wake County voted to end their previous diversity policy, all but proving that money spent for diversity has nothing to do with these test scores. My word, debunking this was easy. He's lying, is what I'm trying to get at. He's a conservative hack who doesn't need to back up his claims, just sprinkle in enough buzzwords here and there to gain the attention of his base in order for them to co-sign what's being said, for the sake of promotion. That's all. I mean, John Amenchukwu has a profile on the Turning Point USA website and is mentioned on the Heritage Foundation's website. Last August, he announced that a major organization is sending him on a national school board tour so he can rant about CRT, gender identity, and queer-friendly books at school board meetings around the country. I will give it to him, though. He's an excellent public speaker, but my dude John had 3 minutes to speak, 180 seconds. He couldn't cite where whites are being demonized for whiteness and blacks are made to feel as if they are inferior or victims came from. Can he point to it in the Wake County curriculum? Did anyone who had a problem with CRT from that era ever cite Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, or Richard Delgado, among others? I added the Reverend with a link to the previous video I made about him back when Twitter was a dumpster fire instead of the hellscape it is now, where he is claiming that his content is being suppressed. He didn't get back to me. Okay, I lied. This Reverend didn't go from a school board meeting to a politician yet, and he's very much tied to politics. He writes for Fox News. I guess results may vary for right-wingers. Remember Ty Brown from the summer of 2021 who said similar nonsense about CRT? Something like, how can I be oppressed when I have 2 medical degrees, but like, he didn't? I even wondered if he had kids who went to school in that particular district. He was a radio host and a YouTuber. Gotta get them clicks, so game recognized game. There has to be a leftist who made a name for themselves during a school board meeting or a city council meeting, right? Tell me if I miss somebody. Leave a name in the comments. Meanwhile, during an East Baton Rouge Parish School Board meeting in June of 2020, Gary Chambers said he planned to speak out about why Robert E. Lee wasn't an appropriate figure to honor with the name of a high school, but instead, he confronted a school board member, Connie Bernard, who seemed to be shopping online at the wrong time. It's just a coincidence that the 3 men that I featured in this video represent North Carolina. Come on and raise up. I've spent many a day in the past taking my shirt off, twisting it around my head, spinning it like a helicopter. Don't come for me. And don't use the definition of apophysis against me for mentioning Kim Kardashian's viral video. And don't question if I watched it just to get this picture here. Look, being famous for being famous is nothing new. That phrase goes all the way back to 1896. And these United States have always made celebrities out of politicians, and politicians have always entertained us, one way or another. I'm just hoping that some trending topic doesn't lead to our next elected official too many more times. A question is, which political party would consider inviting Haley Welch to speak at their national convention? We gonna be all right.
The easiest, most unskilled job is like winning a Republican primary. It takes no skill. It takes very little effort. Like, I guarantee I could become a senator in a Republican state just by putting out like one ad that's like me with a machine gun, shooting a vegan burger and being like, no more woke bullshit. And you would like skyrocket to the top of the polls. Then you're on Fox News and they're like interviewing you about your policies. And all you gotta do is be like, they shouldn't teach the giving tree in class because a man shouldn't have a relationship with a tree. And you'd become like the front runner for the presidential race. I mean, there's no qualifications. Dr. Oz could become a senator, and he just goes on TV and tells senior citizens that they're gonna die if they drink a Diet Coke or I've never watched the show. All I'm saying is, if you think there's no skill to like a McDonald's job, you can't really say that out loud if you're part of the party that has Marjorie Taylor Greene literally working there with you.